All right, we are actually live. Interesting. Still getting the hang of this. Okay, so what we have today is the latest version of the B game. And even from this, there are soon to be changes. And there actually have been changes since this. I did a live play test just a couple of days ago. And a lot of great revisions, a lot of great ideas, and wonderful friends to play test it with. So, immediately, what we have here from version 1 being this hot mess of ideas, but I love ideas. Each one of those things, each one of these is something that has become and transformed into something else. And so, especially when creating a game for the first time, creating anything for the first time, creating anything, throw all the ideas that you have at it. See what sticks. So for me, what has definitely stuck is guard. That's pretty much the thing that has remained unchanged this whole time. Maybe build as well. So that's mid version. Do I need to? All right. That's how the player template looked. This is how it looks now. Much nicer. That looks brilliant comparatively. So same principle. You click and you drag your bees to different jobs. And so all the bees that you have going to build will reduce the amount of honey that you have and increase the amount of comb that you have available. Pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy. All the bees that you have scouting will drag new tiles and put them around somewhere near your hive. Range 3. So for this yellow hive, you have a range of 1, 2, 3. That's their maximum range. That's as far as those bees can fly. For nursing, it costs pollen. Finally got to be able to use pollen in some way. Now, a lot of these things are going to change because by golly they must. Pollen being one of them. Does that scream pollen to you? Doesn't quite scream pollen to me. Honey, that kind of screams honey to me, but again, we're working on that. So pollen is reduced so that the number of bees that you can have is increased. For every, and as you can see here, at each threshold of 10, if you have 6 bees, you can make, if you have 6 comb, you can make 1 bee. If you have 16 comb, you can make 2 bees per turn. If you have 26, you can make 3 bees. 36, you can make 4 bees, etc., all the way up to 96. Since last playtest, I have halved the size of this. Maximum hive is now only 50. That's as big as your hive can get. So each turn in a game, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can make 5 bees a turn. That's the maximum number of bees that you can make a turn. And to do that, you would need 5 nurses. I said 5 nurses. And to spend 5 pollen. Pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory. That's how you get new bees in your hive. Scouting allows you to pull tiles and put them down somewhere. Oh, everything's changed. With this current version, people really, and what I've learned is listen to other people because they have a different life to you. They have different life experiences. They have different things that have happened to them in their lives. They see things, they see the world differently. They are different human beings. So people really wanted, when you compare this to this, or even this version, people really wanted a lot more intentionality. Yes, I can put this tile all the way over here, but why? Why does it matter to me if this tile is exactly the same as this tile no matter where it's put? And I went, you know what, that's fair. So I reduced the value of what players can acquire in a turn. Autumn. You can only, let's say that they had 2 more foragers, you can only put 2 foragers on this autumn tile. That's it. That's the maximum that you can put, and then this tile becomes exhausted. What that third symbol says, and what that third symbol means, is if you have a 3rd autumn tile, maybe there or maybe there, as long as these are all touching, then each one of these tiles is now worth 3 honey or pollen. So I can put a third bee on this tile and get a third pollen or nectar or honey from it. Or maybe Steve puts a third bee onto it and then it becomes exhausted. Whereas before it would have been exhausted at 2 bees. So I've also found that it creates little groupings of tiles that are quite aesthetic. City tiles block movement. If somebody puts a city tile there, that means that yellow has to go 1, 2, 3, because every bee has a speed of 3. So brown can go 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3. Now, if somebody put a city tile there, brown has kind of really lost access to all of this, whereas before it could go 1, 2, 3, it could go 1, 2, 3, it could collect from any of this. Now it's really kind of stuck. It can go 1, 2, 3, and that's about it. It's lost these tiles, which it would have had otherwise, which can kind of suck. But I like the ideas of cities or barren tiles kind of limiting what players can do. Whereas clover, it's the most frequent tile in the deck, and it's nowhere to be found. Clover says, alright, if you get 4 clover together, all you have to do is land on one of them, and you can collect from any of them. So right now, all of this is out of reach from, let's say, purple. Purple can go 1, 2, 3. That's the maximum distance that purple can go. Can't reach any of these tiles. However, if you put this clover here, purple can go 1, 2, 3, and then it can collect from all of this. And that's as far as it goes to. If this clover went all the way around the board, then purple could land here and collect from there. The other flowers work the exact same way. All the flowers work the same, but in groupings of themselves. So 3 summer tiles together give you 3 honey. 3 spring tiles together give you 3 honey. Or pollen. Weather symbols have changed, and what weather does is also changed. Since there is such a limited range, I took out close to home. And I said, alright, if it's sunny, proceed as normal. If it's overcast, foragers and robbers can fly only 2 hexes instead of 3. And skip, swarm, and abscond. Rain has also changed since this version. Players can fly 1 distance, and you still skip, swarm, and abscond. And every flower that is exhausted flips back over. Because I like the idea of it being a game of reality. Because that's what's important to me. I'm trying to represent a whole species with a game that informs and educates people about how these things really interact. Every one of these things that is here is something that bees do. Yes, they scout. Yes, they forage. Yes, they rob. Yes, they guard. Yes, they nurse. Yes, they build. That's how bees... That's how the bumblebee... That's how the honeybee do, to quote Zafrank. So, when you conceptually get bees right, everything makes sense. The entire point and purpose of a beehive is to get to the point where it's strong enough that it can swarm and divide like a cell. That's the entire point of a beehive, so that you can make another beehive and expand your influence, expand the number of bees that are in the area. That's the entire goal. They're a superorganism. They're not worried about the reproduction of one specific bee. In fact, if a bee comes back to the hive drunk, it will be ostracized and, killed and all that sort of stuff, because they drank fermented stuff and you put that into the hive and it messes with it. I know very little about that, but just the concept. But bees do not tolerate weakness. Bees do not tolerate weakness. Even if you've worked your entire life for the hive, they will cast you aside if you become crippled. Because they care fundamentally about efficiency. And efficiency lets them swarm. Efficiency lets them get to the next stage. Efficiency lets them fill up their hive with comb. Efficiency lets them treat their... get as many bees as possible in as much space as possible, using as little space as possible, and fill it up in the most efficient way possible, so that they can get to this point as fast as possible, that they create another swarm, and that they can therefore expand their territory further. And now, this little guy is isolated from everyone else. Blue can go 1, 2, 3 and rob there. Brown can rob there. Yellow could technically rob itself, though I don't know why it would. But now, yellow has all of this space to itself, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to there. So if it starts to get some fields going, other players might start to swarm to this tree. Blue might swarm. Okay, not quite what I had in mind, thank you. Blue might swarm to here. And then try to steal some of yellow stuff. Because, hey, actually, it looks pretty good over there. But all of it's based on what bees really do, which I really like as a beekeeper myself. Swarming is a great thing. Swarming is the point of the hive. Swarming is when your hive gets to a point and it says, hey, we have too many bees. The queen has this little pheromone that's called the QMB, or the queen mandibular pheromone. And what it does is the queen creates it, distributes it to a retinue who distribute it to the hive. And it allows the queen to have control over the hive. They listen to her orders. And especially in young queens, it is vibrant. It is there. As a queen gets older, a queen gets into her 4th or 5th year, her ability to control the hive becomes less and less, such that the hive will forget she exists. If you have a queen that gets old, the hive will literally, her QMB is literally not strong enough for her to control the hive, for her to tell them that they should feed her. And so what the hive will do is they will say, hey, we need a QMB. We need a queen. We don't have one right now. We're not listening to the one that we have. So they will make a new queen using the queen's eggs, and boom, you have a new queen that has a strong QMB that feeds the hive, that tells the hive, hey, listen to me. And then you have a new hive, a new queen. The alternative to that is the old queen, right there, right in there. The old queen will lay an egg, and just before that egg hatches, will swarm. She'll take like 75% of that hive and create a swarm over here. And then, also that should be a tree, but we'll never find one now. Sure. And then, so the queen will collect. No, train of thought. Choo choo. The queen will lay an egg in the hive because she realizes that this hive needs a new queen, or that she's going to swarm away and leave the hive without a queen. That doesn't make sense. She and her hive have just spent the past year, well, she and her daughters have just spent the past year building this hive to be as strong as possible. Now it's strong, defendable. She's going to leave some eggs behind. They're going to start growing a new queen. Just before that queen hatches, she and 75% of that hive on a clear sunny day are going to swarm away and create a new hive over here from scratch. They're going to stock up on as much honey as possible. They're going to swarm to that new hive. And this hive will have a new queen that hatches, that starts to grow, that goes out, gets mated, comes back to the hive. And now with that 25% of the hive that's left, she will start laying eggs. There will be a little drop in population, and then it will rapidly increase with a new, vibrant, voluptuous queen that is so full of eggs that she's ready to burst. And so she will lay egg after egg after egg after egg after egg, and the whole cycle will reproduce. And then next year, next spring, next summer, if both these hives are strong enough, they will both swarm and create new hives over there, and the cycle of life continues. It divides like a cell. The other fun thing about swarming is in a swarm, you won't get stung. You would have to majorly mess up in order to get stung by a swarming hive. The principle, how I think of it, is as follows. let's say that you're there at Thanksgiving dinner and grandma's made the best turkey you've ever had in your life. You stock up. You fill your stomach up. You don't want to do anything. In the same way that the bees of this hive that are swarming stock up on honey. They fill their hives full to the brim with honey, getting ready to swarm. You've just finished off grandma's turkey. You don't really want to get into a fist fight, do you? The bees are the same way. When they are swarming, their stomachs are so full of honey that you can try to get them to sting you, and they probably won't. I put that asterisk in there because it's like a 99.9% chance they won't, but there is a 0.0001% chance that they will. But they're very, very passive. They're very, very docile. They are very full. And they do not want to get into a fist fight. And so when you have a swarming hive, what beekeepers will do, and everyone's amazed, as rightly they should be, with this beekeeper going over and sticking their bare naked hand into the hive. That's a weird thought. Our hands are pretty much always naked unless they're wearing gloves. So they will stick their naked hand into the hive of bees, into this big grouping of bees on a tree, and they will gently scoop it into a new frame, into a new box, into something else. They will collect the queen in a hair clip or something and put her in there. And that hive won't sting them. Because it's swarming, their bellies are full. It's such a simple principle, but it makes so much sense, and I love it. Roll die for player 1. Whoever is player 1. This still alternates. It might be purple on turn 1, and then it might be brown, and then you go clockwise, and then it might be that was blue. And then it might be green, and then you go clockwise, and the next turn it might be blue, and it goes clockwise. Or it might be green, and then green, and then green, and then green, and then green, just by random chance. I like that. I like not knowing who player 1 is next turn. Then you have weather. Then you assign tasks to your bees in the same way that you always have. You might want to put some stuff into guarding. Guarding really does do a great protection, unless you're being robbed by multiple players. And multiple players might literally get together and say, hey, let's all rob yellow. Let's take everything that yellow has. And really mess up yellow's hive. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. You build, scouts, you scout. You can replenish a tile, or you can scout it to 3 hexes away. Foragers, place foragers 3 hexes away, go clockwise. So yellow places 3 foragers, then brown places 3 foragers, then blue, then purple, then green. And you keep going around the circle. Everyone places 3 foragers at a time. Then scout, then forage, then rob, then... And the way this is tracked is kind of interesting. This is changed to be in front of each player, so each player keeps track of their own stuff. The green is in front of green, the brown is in front of brown. Do you like how it's not lined up? You have purple at the bottom, and then blue in the middle, and then red, and then red, and then yellow. Do you like how it's not lined up? Because I do. I think that's great. I think that's awesome. But during the turn, you will increase these numbers. So let's say you collect, 16 nectar. At the end of the turn, all of that nectar will be converted into honey. So you will go up by 16 honey. And then this will go away. And let's say you collect 3 pollen. This will go up by 3. And this will go away. The reason that I've done this is because I need to keep track of what's being collected outside of the hive and what's currently in the hive. If, hypothetically, a player is robbed, well, all the stuff that's out here that's just been collected by the bees that haven't returned home yet obviously isn't in the hive. So you might get robbed of 20 honey, but you also might bring in 20 honey, or 20 nectar, which then becomes honey, because that's what honey is. It's a converted, substance over time. And I'm thinking about including a little rule that says, actually, the turn that you collect the nectar is not the turn that you get the honey. It takes a turn. Or throwing in combining scouting and foraging, and putting in another step, which is conversion of nectar to honey, but that's for a later date. But yeah, so you might get your hive robbed out, but then still bring in some honey to feed your bees. As for pollen just kind of exists. Pollen doesn't necessarily need that tracker, but it's still good to have so that players know what they collected in their turn. It gets added to what's in their hive, and as long as it doesn't exceed here, so let's say this hive is 26 and you have 25 things, you add up your pollen and your honey and you make this go there, and as long as that is less than how much stuff you have in your hive, you're doing well. There's a little chart. The nectar symbol colors are inverted. Oh well. Yep, they are, but whatever. All this is going to change anyway. Placeholders, folks, placeholders. And yeah, so you play the game, you get up to the point where you swarm, and then you swarm one more time. And once you have 3 hives on the board, the first player to get there wins. Now, future mechanics that are going to be added are sabotaging other players' bees, hives, sabotaging other players' hives. Because if you swarm away, that leaves it open for that hive to get mobbed. It is now weaker, unless it puts everything into guard and a couple of things into forage and a couple of things into nursing. Because it doesn't need to build anymore. A hive that is ready to swarm never really needs to build anything again. So, yeah. And so that's an entire action that it never needs to do. Once something has swarmed, it's not going to be robbing anywhere. So you don't need to rob. If you've gotten to the point where you're ready to swarm, chances are that you don't really need to scout. So really the only thing that a swarmed hive needs to do is focus on nursing, getting more bees into the hive so that it can be strong, guarding, protecting itself from other players who might try to do devious things against it, and foraging, making sure that it has a steady income of honey and pollen. And then once you get to enough hives, you win the game. So, to go over it all one more time, you build, scout, forage, rob, nurse, guard, and nurse. Forage, rob and guard happen at the same time, and then you nurse. Then you check for next turn's weather. Okay. So you player 1 is check for weather, assign tasks to your bees, do those tasks, increase the amount of honey and pollen that you collect, nectar and pollen that you collect, and then convert all of that into what's actually in your hive. Make sure that you don't exceed the strength of your hive, the amount of storage space in your hive. And then in nurse, add bees to your hive, then check for swarming, and then check if anyone wants to abscond. Swarming is the good thing, absconding is the not so good thing. If your hive, let's say you are this red hive here, and this is kind of what it looks like, you really might want to consider leaving, because your hive is just going to become weaker and weaker, not going to be able to support itself. And at that point, so absconding resets your hive to 0, and you fly to a tree somewhere far, far away. And then from here, you build up your hive again. So absconding, pretty self-explanatory, makes a bit of sense, but is a bad version of swarming. You don't want to abscond if you can help it. If you can't help it, it gives your hive a way out without being strong enough to swarm. And so absconding is something that bees really do. All of this is stuff that bees really do. They pick the weakest hive in an area and they rob it, and they take everything from it. Happened to us. They SEAL Team 6'd our hive once. Some bees snuck into the hive, killed the queen, and over the next month or 2 months, the hive became weaker and weaker and weaker until it finally couldn't protect itself at all. And the bees were aimless and lost, tried to build another queen, got washed away in a storm. And, yeah, these things happen. But we live, we learn. They didn't, but we do. and then you can designate which player you are robbing. If I'm going to rob brown, I do that. If I'm going to rob green. If I'm going to rob purple. If I'm going to rob blue. And what you can do in screen top that you can't exactly do around the table, but you can do it around the table in other ways, is you right click, you say view, and then you allow share with brown, view policy, allow seats. So if I switch myself over to brown, I can see that brown is going to be robbing blue. Or I can see that yellow is going to be robbing blue. And so brown and yellow might team up to rob blue. Might put a bunch of stuff into robbing, might put a bunch of stuff into robbing. And then if blue doesn't guard, blue might lose all of its honey that it's worked so hard for. Anyway, didn't mean to go for that long, but I hope y'all enjoyed. And this is, you know, at the end of the day, I think mostly for me, so that I remember what it once looked like. Oh, and then, no, this is going to just, you know, slot into there as extra tiles for players that swarm all the way out to here. So this red goes 1, 2, 3, and then you can drag a thing onto there, and then you got that, and then you know, another one of those, and one of these. And then when you do swarm, you get a second hive, denoted by the number 2. So that if somebody wants to rob your hive, they designate the robbing hive too. Yeah. So I think it's really shaping up to be an awesome game, and I've gotten really good comments about it, which makes me happy. Because there are people that lie to you, and then there's some people that are like, yeah, it's pretty good. Getting into the final stages. Changes are harder and harder to make. But I like it. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. I think it's going to be great. And I think it still needs work, but I'm willing to put that work in. Yeah. So, I will leave y'all to it and have a wonderful